Hello everyone and welcome back once again to Newegg TV. My name is Paul and today we have the unflappable JJ here from ASUS with us. How's it going, JJ?
I'm doing all right, boss. Thank you for having me, and thank you for asking.
Well, thanks for being here, man. We've been talking about the new Z87 platform, the Z87 chipset and derivatives thereof. We've also been talking, of course, about all of the fantastic hardware that ASUS is releasing to go along with that. Of course, these are all socket 1150 motherboards compatible with Intel's newest 4th generation core processors. To which we have already covered the mainstream series of boards. We're going to be also covering the ROG series of boards, workstation boards, and what we have right here is the TUF series of boards. And the TUF series is one of my favorites for many reasons. But JJ, could you sort of give us a rundown of what market segment are the TUF series of boards aimed at? What kind of folks and what kind of computers are these boards designed to be implemented with?
Well, that's a really good question, and to kind of give some context and to answer that question, you know, we speak a little bit going back to where the mainstreams come from. So the mainstream boards were kind of a best-in-case representation of really kind of leading with a high degree of functionality and feature set, and really trying to kind of fit multiple segmentations within one board division. You know, from there, we of course started to see that there was a kind of want and need from specific communities within the primary kind of do-it-yourself community of saying, hey, I want maybe a more specialized board developed for a specific level of usage. And from that, of course, first came the ROG division. And then from there, after we had the ROG division, we branched out and we created the TUF division. And TUF was really kind of a consensus of feedback from ROG and from the mainstream series, and that you had users that were really kind of appreciating the higher level of component quality and the attention to detail that we were bringing forth on ROG as well as on the mainstream series. But we were getting feedback that's saying, hey, you know what? I might not be using maybe some of those very centric overclocking aspects of the motherboard, or maybe I don't need as much extensive levels of connectivity on the motherboard, you know, and maybe some of those more specialized one-off technologies that sometimes get developed for the deluxe series or for the higher-end mainstream series. So, you know, with that, we kind of went back to the community and we said, well, okay, so what you're asking for is still keep maybe some of the really key items on the deluxe and kind of ROG model, so maybe higher-end component quality, you know, but what else would you guys be interested in? And the feedback that we got was, you know, well, we'd like to have something that we really feel confident in terms of the reliability and the durability, because that's historically what we've been known for, is, you know, really solid boards in terms of that being something you install, you set up, you run with it, and you can feel confident that it's going to give you what you need in terms of performance, reliability, and stability. But us kind of wanting to push that even further, we wanted to create something special, and that's where the TUF kind of division came out of. We even leveraged actually a lot of the validation and stringent compliance testing that the WS team had incorporated and took that in, and then went to the community and said, well, let's respond to a lot of you guys are really interested in cooling, you know, monitoring, and we'll weave that in with an enhanced reliability facet, and we'll also then weave that in with a superior level of component quality. We'll add in some more stringent validation, and we'll have a very specialized SKU that ultimately at the end of the day is targeted towards, one, users that are looking more at long-term builds. So not necessarily maybe jumping from chipset to chipset, but they have more of a focus of considering platforms, you know, usually within maybe 2 to 4 year blocks, or even 3 to 5 year blocks. And that's also where the stringent compatibility, the reliability, and the validation testing came into play, because that, when added in with our higher component quality, is what allowed us to release TUF with a 5-year warranty, which was critical, because if we were targeting the board at a demographic of users that wanted a longer term build, that was going to tie into that. And to kind of go along with that, we also wanted to incorporate a set of features and functions that really spoke to the guys that wanted an advanced level of cooling and monitoring. And we kept refining those type of technologies, whether they were going to be specialized, you know, coatings, or maybe on the heatsink, optimized layout, or things that have now evolved into like the thermal armor. And the assist fan technologies that we have in there, and other variables to help to really give you the most control over cooling and monitoring your system. Now, lastly, I'll touch on the fact that while we don't generally message overclocking, the TUF series is an outstanding board in this respect, just like all of the actual ASUS series boards. You know, we mentioned this on the Dash A on mainstream, that it clocks just as solid as the deluxe, and the same thing is the TUF is going to offer just as well as overclocking as the deluxe, or even as, you know, our Maximus our Maximus 6 Hero board. So overall, while we don't focus in that respect, you can still feel confident that if you want a board that is going to be able to overclock, while we don't message that with TUF, you can still feel confident that you'll have that available to you.
So you got the long-term reliability, you got the high-level components, long warranty provided by ASUS to back all that up, as well as everything else you mentioned. But I think you forgot one thing. You guys did a really awesome design aesthetic with these boards as well.
Sure.
I love the color scheme. It's got a military color scheme, and then with the last generation Z77, you guys introduced the thermal armor, at least the full thermal armor shield that we saw on the Z77 Sabertooth board, which continuing right here. And you guys have also added like some accessories into the mix and that sort of thing. So like over here, we have this little. You actually have the thermal armor sold separately, but this actually seems a little bit, it's a little bit too small here, JJ. This seems like the wrong size. Do you have a...
We do have something different. Actually, what you've noticed here is actually something very special. So before I show you what actually this is going to represent, you know, rounding off on some of that messaging that you talked about for TUF, is a lot of people, you know, maybe you don't always pay attention to our logo, but if you take a look at that little logo right there, I'll show you guys right there. That's the TUF emblem. Mm-hmm. And when we first designed TUF, we had actually designed it with the mindset that there would always maybe be more than one actually TUF SKU.
Okay.
And so you actually have the fangs from the Sabertooth, you have the wings from an animal that's called the Gryphon, and then you have actually the shield in the center, which is the ASUS. So there was always the concept that we might continue to expand upon that, and for this generation we actually have. So I would actually like to introduce to you guys a brand new SKU for the TUF family, and this is the Gryphon. So it's a micro ATX version as part of the TUF family.
So this would be just called the Z87 Gryphon.
That's correct.
Part of the TUF series, and as you can see, this is the micro ATX form factor that this thermal armor matches up with. So excellent. I love smaller form factor builds, and here we have, you know, you got the big brother, you got the little brother right there, and they both look very serious, dude.
Yeah.
But
so
just really, really awesome.
So let's talk about, you know, what actually is some of the new features and functionality we've introduced for this generation. So first and foremost, you're 100% right that we've continued the trend of incorporating the thermal armor design. And through its actually generational revisions, we're actually now at version 4, technically, of the thermal armor. So for this revision, we've actually made a couple of changes. The first one you're actually going to see is going to be here in the top section of the board. So if you look at the overall VRM section, you're going to see that the actual thermal armor itself now has these flow valves. And so these flow valves can actually go ahead and allow you to control the way that actually air will pass through the thermal armor system. So depending on your type of airflow configuration, you might either want to maximize airflow that's directly being maybe brought in or exhausted through the heatsink assembly. Maybe you want to go ahead and create a top-down intake from your top of your chassis fans blowing through this to this area. Really, it's ultimately about just giving you the flexibility of managing the airflow that best is going to benefit you. So this is going to be a new introduction that we have for this generation of thermal armors with these flow valves implemented. So that's a nice plus point. Now we're still going to maintain the assist fan technologies that we incorporated in the previous generation. So you're going to have 2 assist fans. So I'm just going to show you an example here of the assist fan that comes included. So there's 2 of these that come with the board. And you can go ahead and actually install them, one into the VRM section, or what we've now coined as the CPU section, and then another one for the GPU zone, so the secondary part of the board, which is centralized in the center. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll show you guys an example of a system that I already have with its fully installed, as well as show you some other aspects of how we've evolved the thermal armor. So you can see right here in the center, we've gone ahead and settled in the assist fan. Now these are fully controllable in the UEFI, as well as in our software environment in the thermal radar software. So keep in mind that while we're calling this thermal armor, underneath here we have the full thermal radar system. So that means we have multiple hardware ICs that all sprinkled out throughout this motherboard that allow us to get a full real-time thermographic map of the system and the corresponding temperatures for things, whether it's like the VRM assembly, the PCH, the USB 3, the VGA zone. You can get all that real-time temperature data. And actually for this generation, we've gone ahead and revised our thermal radar software design to now where we can do actually thermal assessments, where we can actually map this information real time and we can benchmark the thermal cooling performance that you have in each section. And you can actually see how your system will respond based on heat load in a nice actual graph.
Oh.
So it allows you to go ahead and see, you know, if we tax the CPU and we check the actual thermal response, you'll see a curve that shows you your system is very responsive, as your system might not be as responsive. And when you see that data, then of course we can help to maybe maximize that by either maybe tuning the fan profiles to give you better response, or of course you might then want to consider upgrading your thermals as well. If we take a look here at the side, you can see that we also have the secondary GPU assist fan that's configured. And we've actually done a huge amount of work that through the right selection of the fans and through the control functionality that we offer, that you can essentially have these almost be in an inaudible experience. So even though they're going to be small in profile, you don't need to worry about compromising the experience from an acoustic perspective. Now, another item that we've added in for this generation is we have this great little kind of a removable fan filter right here. So this is a cool little plus piece that actually will go onto your I/O shield. If maybe you want to grab that I/O shield, Paul.
Of course. Oh wait, this is the I/O shield.
Yeah. You can see that we have it installed there, and so you can go ahead and remove that. And so that allows you to go ahead and maximize being able to easily clean it in and out. So that's a cool little touch point that we have there in terms of the dust filter that goes there on the I/O shield. Now, another portion that you're going to see that's entirely new is if we go to the side as well, you're going to see that what looks different there, right?
Yeah, it seems like you have put black caps over all of your inputs and outputs there on the back.
Correct. So this is the next generation of dust defenders. So, you know, a lot of people don't realize that you can have things like dust, debris, dander, you know, different particles that can float through the air that can settle into your connectors that can cause actually shorts, surge, spikes, oxidation that can cause actually contact issues, you know, especially actually with the GPU slot. So if you remember in the first generation of Dust Defender, we incorporated the covers for the PCI Express. And at this point, you can see that the board is pretty much covering all key exposed areas. So all the back I/O, all the PCI Express, the front USB, even our SATA ports actually have protective covers on there, with the exception of one, because we assume you would at least be utilizing one SSD or one mechanical hard drive in terms of your connectivity for your setup as it goes. But that's another new update that we've gone ahead and phased in for this thermal armor design and the protection overall as a whole for the TUF series. So that's another cool plus point. Now, it doesn't even stop there though. We've gone ahead and even further refined the thermal radar design to include now optional Temp sensors. So you're going to get 3 of these that actually come included inside the box. And on the board, there's actually 3 Temp sensors. So I believe maybe you can point those out for me. They're down there, I believe, towards the CMOS battery section. And if you go ahead and make a connection lead to that, you can go ahead and put your optional Temp sensors in any location that you want. So maybe you want to put one by your chassis, maybe one over the hard drive, maybe one on the back of the GPU. It's pretty much run it wherever you'd like, and you're going to have multi points of temperature mapping real-time provided to you from wherever you decide you want to place those 3 optional temp sensors. So when you correspond that to the onboard sensors that are built onto the motherboard, you're getting an unprecedented level of control and flexibility when it comes to not only monitoring, but then making adjustments to the reported values that you're seeing through the thermal radar software.
I like to take one and feed it over right by the front intake so I can see what kind of the ambient air temperature coming in.
100%. That's a great design consideration, especially if you have a lot of storage in that front section as well. It allows you to go ahead and keep an idea in terms of how much airflow you have coming over your, you know, what's really important, which is going to be your hard drives, which are containing your data.
Nice.
Now, I know there's something that you were really digging, which is actually on the back. So we also have an entirely new design here, which is the TUF Fortifier implementation. So this is a pretty awesome piece of little hardware right here, right? You know, this will be both on the Gryphon SKU and on the standard Sabertooth SKU. And keep in mind that everything I've actually discussed is going to be consistent between both boards. So you're not distilling anything down by just going to the MicroTX version in terms of the Gryphon. You're getting all the great features and functions that you have on the Sabertooth ATX board, but you're just getting it in a MicroTX version.
So essentially, the only primary difference is just going to be the lack of a couple more PCI Express expansion
Correct,
slots?
But in terms of the thermal radar, the sensors, the high-end components, things like the TUF chokes, the TUF MOSFETs, the TUF capacitors, all those are the consistent between the two. Even the capacitors for this generation, which I'll show you in a moment, we've upgraded them to the new Nichicon GT 10K rated capacitors. So those same caps that we're actually using before on ROG. So if you remember, we're using 5K rated caps on mainstream, which is already over the 2X that competitors are using on 2K caps. So TUF is using now 10K caps. That's 5x over what the industry average is. But going back to the, the fortifier here, you get a couple of really cool benefits with this. One is it's going to add overall actually rigidity and minimize torsion or flexing for the board itself. So this is great for you guys that are using really big coolers, maybe something like a Noctua DH series, dual 120 millimeter, do 140 millimeter fans. Sometimes when you torque things down, you can sometimes flex or bow the board a little bit. This will help to maintain the best rigidity for the board and minimize maybe any of the trace layout being impacted, which can affect long-term stability or reliability. Secondary to that, it can serve as a partial heatsink. You can see right here in this little section.
There it actually makes contact with the board to provide some extra heat dissipation?
Correct. So it's making contact for the back of the VRM directly against the MOSFET section. So that's the hottest part of the VRM is the MOSFET and the drivers. So essentially it's acting like a conductive heat sink to be able to absorb some of that heat and dissipate it across the back panel.
Very nice.
And then in addition to that, and third, another benefit is just even when handling the board, it's a lot nicer to handle because of course your hands aren't directly touching the exposed solder points, which sometimes can nick or cut your hand, right? And then fourth, it just looks really cool, right?
It does. So I got to ask, whose idea was the "We Got Your Back"?
That's us in the PM and the management team. We thought that we're adding something cool, and that why add a little bit of a a cool call out to that and give you guys kind of the recognition that we know that you're going to appreciate it for what it is, but at the same time it's going to give you some great feature and functionality.
It does bring up the possible dilemma that I might need to put a windowed side panel on both sides of my case now.
I think that's a good dilemma to have.
Just pointing that out.
Now, lastly, we still maintain the convection holes on the board, both the Gryphon and the TUF board, the Sabertooth board from the previous generation. So there's going to be multiple actually convection holes that allow air to flow through the actual motherboard and exhaust through the back out, and that helps to actually reduce PCB board temperature as well. So when you consider kind of all those things weaved in together, I mean, there's a huge degree of functionality and feature set that really aligns with guys, and ladies that are, serious about wanting not only to have a really good-looking board in terms of the overall aesthetic, but serious about cooling, monitoring, and having that interest in terms of reliability. We've got the certificate of reliability here that we always include that helps you kind of understand that additional layer that we're putting in when we're working with the boards. But we tend to not want to just focus on that it's just a good quality part. It's easy to pick quote-unquote good quality parts. Where TUF we really feel distinguishes itself is actually in what's called our aging process. So this is actually the validation process that we take after we've selected those parts, put it onto the board, and we'll then put the boards into specialized chambers. We'll test, batches of 20 to 40 boards at a period of maybe sometimes 14 to over 20 days, consistently loading every single part up. The CPU, the memory, the SATA bus, the I/O buses, all of them concurrently, testing to see how the board reacts, if it's maintaining stability. And that goes along with an even additional stability tests and validation tests that we do, so that when we can put the board to market, we really feel confident that we're giving you the highest caliber of reliability and stability that we can offer, while still giving you a great feature set that aligns with kind of the enthusiast market.
TUF is definitely an appropriate acronym.
Yeah,
I must say. Also, the attention to detail. I know I'm just pointing out kind of smaller things, but there's a set of little caps that come along with the TUF fortifier. Look, it's a black Q connector.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I just had to point that out. Black
No,
Q
I entirely agree.
like
Now, one thing that you guys might find interesting is that, just for kind of reference, the Gryphon SKU, if I go ahead and take this guy back and we'll pop back over the Micro ATX version.
Oh, of course.
This one won't be sold with the thermal armor.
Okay.
So just to kind of keep you guys for a little bit more aggressive price point, you're still going to get all the great value points that the TUF board has to offer, including things that we even have on the mainstream series, like the i-series Intel NIC, the USB boost technology, the network eye control, all those kind of things that we really like. The advanced fan connectivity, like always, of course, for 3-pin and 4-pin control on all headers. But the armor system and the fortifier and the dust defenders, those are going to actually be sold in a separate kit, which you have right over there to your side, which is going to be the armor kit. So that'll come included with the full thermal armor, the dust defenders, the fan, the optional temp probes. That'll all be sold, so that if you want to take advantage of not only the additional feature set that you have with the armor kit, but as well as some of the improved functionality, then you can go ahead and purchase that separately and then install that onto the Gryphon by itself. But by default, it will just be the board without the thermal armor.
And I have to say, even without the thermal armor, it's still a very striking board, and it still maintains the same color scheme and everything. And it still has a black PCB, so it's still going to integrate with just about any system. So it kind of gives you the option. If you like the thermal armor, you can purchase it as an add-on. If you don't, well, you can get the board standalone, and you still get all of those same design considerations that you've already discussed.
Correct.
All right. Well,
so overall, I think that gives you a pretty good breakdown in terms of what we're doing for TUF. Really, once again, I think an outstanding board, really great for guys that are looking for long-term builds, that, you know, where their focus is that they want a solid board, you know, they want kind of all the key technologies, good quality, great quality components, you know, but with a focus, like I said, on that monitoring, focus on cooling, you know, and like I said, if they definitely want to overclock, it's going to be capable, even if that's not necessarily the focus as well.
All right, guys. So we've been taking a closer look at the ASUS TUF series of motherboards. These are all based on the Z87 chipset with the 1150 socket for Intel's 4th generation core processors, the Sabertooth Z87 and the all-new Gryphon Z87. JJ, thanks again for stopping by and sharing all this information with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to all you guys for watching. Of course, if you'd like to see more videos, we have lots more with JJ right now because we've been going over just about the entire product lineup that ASUS has come out with along with this new platform launch. So be sure to check those out. Be sure to subscribe to Newegg TV if you haven't already. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed all of this information. And of course, we'll see you all next time on Newegg TV.